If you are trying to get into Y Combinator, the best startup accelerator in the world, you must be doing this one thing. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing how to ace the Y Combinator interview. So I have a couple other videos on what Y Combinator is like, how I got in as a solo female founder, especially one that is not exactly the most technical. And then I have another video as well on how to do the written application, but today we're going to focus on the second step of the application process, which is the interview. So only about 7% of those that apply end up getting an invite to interview, and only 1 to 2% of total applicants end up making it past the interview process and getting into Y Combinator. So a little bit about me. My name is Catherine, and I founded a company called Anja Health in 2021. We basically help pregnant parents freeze stem cells from their umbilical cords and placenta to use for future disease treatment in the family. And I was in the winter 22 batch, so I applied towards the end of 2021 and then moved to San Francisco in January to March for the batch of 2022. I have since raised around $5 million in venture capital funding and scaled the business to $1.5 million ARR. And now I am sharing and memorializing all of my information on my YouTube channel. So without further ado, let's get into it. So why it's so important to prepare for the Y Combinator interview is it is only 10 minutes. Generally, the pleasantries are kept to a minimum, so they will almost immediately dive right into questions for the YC interview, because if you think about it, they do so many of these interviews in a day. They don't want to get to know you. They just want to know your business and see if you would be one of the few companies to get into Y Combinator. So do not expect a lot of pleasantries in the beginning, and there will probably be multiple partners on the call so that they can make a decision quickly, and they do get back to you that day. So for my interview, for instance, when I walked in, Surbi Sarna, the healthcare partner at the time, she was the one leading the questions for me, and I think largely because I am a healthcare founder. But there were other partners on the call, and I believe they interjected for 1 or 2 questions, but I honestly barely even remember if there were multiple people on the call because it was so short and they were doing questions so quickly. So I was just focused on getting the answers out of my mouth in an efficient way. And because my industry is so niche, they actually ended up focusing a lot of the questions on the viability of the industry and the longevity of the industry rather than some of the typical YC questions. So I would also be prepared to just be knowledgeable in general about your industry and walk in with confidence so that you can answer them quickly and efficiently. And you basically interview with typically a couple of Y Combinator partners, and they will interrupt you and they will be slightly abrasive in tone. So you have to be prepared for that, which is why I think it's important to think about the interview beforehand. Although on the official YC website, it says don't rehearse, I think it's important to at least have practice interviews so that you feel accustomed to the style of interview that you will be facing, and that you also have at least a semblance of answers prepared, because that's what I did. And I love public speaking and speaking off the cuff, but I think it was really important for me to have a couple of practice interviews in my back pocket so I knew what to expect. So my first tip for the Y Combinator interview is to look at jamescun.github.io/IPG. This is a real-time interview practice tool that I found, and you can basically run through the questions with the given amount of time that you likely would have during the 10 minutes in order to work through the interview. But if you want a full list of questions, you can also go to this Reddit page. And if you go to r/Y Combinator, you can see the interview questions, and every batch people post them so that you can get a sense of what people are asking, but they generally don't change batch to batch. So you can just look at these questions and have an idea of what you want to say. And then next, I would recommend reaching out to people that have done a YC interview before, and especially those that have gotten into YC. I think that's really important. And just ask them to do a practice interview with you, because they will know what to index for. So I think I did around 5 practice interviews when I got an interview. I applied twice, but I didn't get an interview the first time. So the second time I got an interview, I practiced with 5 other YC founders, and one of them practiced with me twice because he had some feedback on how I answered certain questions, and he also wanted to practice interrupting me more often. So overall, you want to be prepared to have really concise answers, because if you go on too long, they will interrupt you and you will feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a chance to actually say what I wanted to say. So you want to make sure that you are saying what you want to say in the first 3 to 5 seconds of the question's answer. Another tip is you want to try to have improvements traction-wise since you last applied, because I think that that is truly the best illustration that you can execute, and that's really what they're looking for, is people that will execute, have resilience, and seem to have some social EQ and prowess in general. So you want to make sure that you are continuing to work on the business, or at least can demonstrate that you can execute quickly. Even if the window between applying to the interview was really, really short, there's still little things that you can do, like getting an LOI from a customer that doesn't require a whole lot of time, that you can probably try and execute on just to illustrate that you can. And next, if you are going to do a Y Combinator interview, you want to make sure that you are doing this one thing. So I recently listened to a podcast, Lenny Rachiski's podcast. He does a lot of product management related interviews, but he also does a lot of founder interviews in general. And he interviewed Jessica Livingston, who is one of the co-founders of Y Combinator. And she had a whole section in her podcast interview about identifying social prowess during interviews amongst YC founders, and especially analyzing the dynamics between co-founders. So this is a quote from what she said. She pays close attention to interpersonal dynamics during interviews. Green flags include signs of mutual respect and collaboration. Red flags include one founder dominating conversations or preventing their co-founder from speaking. And she said similarly, if they have unequal equity, that seems like a red flag, because people shouldn't have like that unequal of equity if they are doing such an early stage business. So you want to make sure that if you are preparing with a co-founder, I was a solo founder, so I did not have to do this, but I generally think that they are trying to look for a reason to say no to you. So you want to give them reasons to say yes, because they generally say no to most people when they interview them. As I mentioned, 93% of people do not even get an interview. Only a small fraction of the people that interview end up actually getting in. So you want to make sure that you are giving them a reason to say yes to you. And then lastly, make sure you have a demo ready for the YC interview. You want to make sure that you are prepared to demonstrate what the product is, and also the demo can show that you can execute. So I'm going to read through some of the actual questions that happened during the interview, and I'm going to give you some of my personal answers that I had, or what I think might be good answers. So how will you make money? Angel Health makes money through a subscription that we charge parents. Why isn't someone already doing this? People are already doing what Angel Health is doing, but the incumbents are archaic. They don't do placenta banking, they don't prioritize accessibility, and they do not have a community or social media presence, or a proprietary means of processing the stem cells to ensure that they can maximize stem cell count. What do you know about this space or product that others don't know? I personally know how to reach parents where they are. I've demonstrated this by building out a following of 167,000 on TikTok, and we see comments every day along the lines of, I gave birth 4 days ago and nobody told me about this, and they needed this today. What's the biggest mistake you've made? My biggest mistake has been hiring the wrong folks too early, just because they were passionate about the product and mission, and not because they were an actual good fit for the role. How do you know customers need what you're making? Every single video that I've posted on social media has gone viral, and the comments are filled with pregnant parents that tell me that they wish they knew about this sooner prior to giving birth, and also flooded with comments of those that are pregnant saying that their OBGYN never told them about this and that they wish that they did. Who would be your next hire? My next hire would be a head of operations to help me automate and build out a lot of the supply chain operations that I've already set the foundation for. So you can kind of get a sense of how quickly I'm able to answer these questions. And these were not my exact answers during the interview, because this is now 4 years later and the business has changed quite a bit, but you can get a sense of how on top of it and sure of yourself you need to be, because they run through so many questions within that 10-minute time frame, and they will not go overtime and they will interrupt you. So for that reason, you want to make sure that you can do practice interviews and things of that nature. But that, in my opinion, is how you ace the Y Combinator interview. And when you're thinking about how you're speaking, I would generally recommend abiding by the guidelines of Paul Graham's essay on writing. He does a really good explanation of how he thinks about really concise forms of clear thinking and clear writing. And if you can speak in the same tone, I think that that is what Y Combinator folks look for. A, because it's a good framework, but B, because Paul Graham was one of the co-founders of Y Combinator and married to Jessica Livingston. So yeah, that is how to ace the Y Combinator interview. And I hope this was helpful. Definitely comment below if you have other content that you'd want to see about YC. Thanks for watching. Bye.
But these bitches in my business cut me out to choosing violence. If you see me out in public, you don't know me, keep it silent. In the bedroom, I be screaming, but outside I keep it quiet. You know, I'm the lowest of the lowest. But if you can keep it